Lord of the Flies follows a story of a group of young boys that attempt to survive a plane crash on a foreign island. A journey of savagery and hopelessness. 30 boys aged 12 and under desperately seeking to survive. No adults, no life skills, and a jungle of opportunity and danger. This book is an excellent example of what malleable young children can turn into without the confines of society. I wanted to mimic this scenario perfectly. There would be no raids, no help, no traders, nothing dropping from the sky, and no starting survival supplies. I set the difficulty to 500%, but there was one issue. How could I replicate the dread of surviving a plane crash? -20 persistent mood. Our goal for this playthrough is simple: to save the kids. Yeah, save the kids. Enough. Welcome to Lord of the Children. It was the early morning on the 11th of December when the survivors extracted themselves from the crash. In the wreckage, the adults had died and the plane itself had lodged into the jungle, causing a scar upon the land. We had a mainly random assortment of 6 to 12-year-olds, but a few of the boys stood out. Ralph was one of the older boys in the group at 12 years of age. He was charismatic, dependable, and a natural leader. Piggy, a smart lad that liked to cook and eat, but was physically useless with an annoying voice. Then there were the delinquents. Jack was jealous, charismatic, strong, and hated Ralph with a passion. The antagonist to our protagonist. Jack's main lackey was Roger. Roger was a dirty rat, a sociopath that got a kick out of rolling the handicap down hills. But that might just be the mindset I needed to survive this disaster of a scenario. The rest of the 25 boys were mainly younger and had randomized traits and skills, but none of them had anything above a single passion, and the majority of skills were level 1 or 0. Our first objective was to get shelter and feed this band of brothers. We surveyed our new home for a hospitable shelter. I felt that the mountains in the northwest provided our best bet. Boys ran around split between various tasks, but children were not so easy to organize. Many spent idle time playing with each other, not understanding the gravity of what was to come. Feeding 30 mouths was going to be no simple task. Two main groups were formed: the farming committee that sought to grow food and the shelter group. Our colonists had no life experience and near zero in every skill. Failures were going to be a common occurrence in the most mundane of tasks. It took each child half a day to cut down a single tree, and the only growing space was littered with dense clusters of plants and tree. As the night fell, we slowly started making progress on our bastion of safety, but mental breaks were common. This night marked the start of the turmoil. Both Basque and Trembo broke down over the current situation and suffered a daze. The weak were not likely to survive long in this disastrous circumstance. On the morning of the second day, Corey and Basque started fighting, and Kai threw a tantrum, attacking what little we had worked so far to make. This was followed by more tantrums, dazes as the hunger started to set in. Barrow was falling apart at the seams and went berserk. The other kids had no choice but to gang up on him and punch him to death. Then followed Radabalo. Our unfortunate metamorphosis had begun. Orange ran off into the dense forest, abandoning our colony. Rio didn't understand why. Why us? His mind warped around this question as he went into a catatonic state. A catatonic state was a guaranteed death sentence for this colony, as we could not afford to feed vegetables. This was followed by another desertion by Gyra. At noon, I realized everyone was on the brink of starvation, so we shifted priorities to gathering, but lacking the experience in plants led to more foraging failures that taunted our growling stomachs. The harvesting crew worked throughout the night, desperate for nutrition that would not involve cannibalism. In the late hours of day 2, another berserk break. We had to rally the infirmary to subdue him. Things were not looking good, and it was about to get a lot worse. There was not enough food at this stage, and like a mother hamster eating her young, we survived off the nourishment of our friends' bodies. This day was filled with murderous rages, dazes, and all sorts of mental breaks. Although the cannibalism had started, there there were a few pigs on the island. I had avoided them until this point since fighting a pig with children would cause mass casualties. We also had no safe place to cook, but at this point we didn't have a choice. The threat of loss of life and limbs seemed trivial compared to the growing threat of mass cannibalism. The fourth day was a dark day indeed. Piggy had the unfortunate task of efficiently using up our meat stockpiles. Any leather we could gain, no matter how small, also could be made into sleeping bags. But as this scenario would have it, this was the day of death. Many of the survivors that had taken damage were downed and helpless. Without food or proper medical care, they started dropping like flies. Throughout the day, Ralph continued to try and make improvements to the living quarters. We were not sure how many would make it through the next few days, so we had to stabilize the mood going forward however possible. December 15th. Christmas. The last day of winter, a day of celebration, a day of giving, and it started with Eric giving the gift of cold-blooded murder to Rhodoros. The day was spent in a haze of animalistic celebration. When events happen that are too dark for your mind to grasp, you start to change them, warp them, alter your memories and personality. We were no longer boys, we were animals desperate to survive. After a day of celebration, the survivors of the troop settled in for the night in their new human leather sleeping bags as the day turned and the new year formed. This would be the year 1950, the year of the tiger. Our main source of nutrition was still questionable at best, and we needed a game plan to change that ASAP. With some rice coming down the pipeline, all that was needed was something to tide us over. It was time to hunt the pig. After gathering a group of our most violent boys, we tracked down and surrounded the pig. Using clubs made of wood and our own limbs, we smashed and kicked the pig into an unconscious pulp. We only suffered one wound from this whole endeavor. This was a very successful hunt. But with any up, there is a down. The day turned disastrous as Ralph went into a catatonic state. He was one of our best warriors and the protagonist of the book, and now he was a vegetable. And this wasn't VeggieTales. The next few days felt like months as we cycled through our routine. Hunger, mental breaks, death. By day 7, we were starting to get enough food to forego cannibalism, but Piggy, plagued by the memories of butchering his friends, had a berserk break. Our only half-decent chef was put out of commission, so it was back to raw pig meat. Day 8, we lost Eric, another soul that decided the natural life was more appealing than this abomination of survival. I don't blame him. At this point, I don't even know what our biggest priority is. Mood or food? We had some stable-ish food sources, but if our kids kept breaking, we would have no one left to feed. And then Jack got an infection. This was pretty much a guaranteed death sentence. We decided that his last task before leaving our colony would be to secure the future food source. Jack was going to go pig hunting. And so he met his noble end after killing one and battling a second so. His violence aimed towards creating world peace. God rest your soul, Jack. Shortly after this, Ralph passed naturally in his coma. For there is no end more natural than starvation. And the icing on the cake? Piggy went catatonic. Day 9 started with positivity, a welcome change. Roger threw a party in the barracks and we started to build graves for our fallen comrades. The rice was coming in and we would not need to eat our friends any longer. The only loss of this day was Mabrakan. We entered day 10 with 4 colonists remaining. Roger, Ergo, Hyena, and Chimpanzee. I needed to do everything possible to keep the mood up now. Any more losses would spell disaster for this colony. We decided to give Ralph and Jack a proper send-off. It felt good to regain some sense of humanity with these funerals and not go around skinning and eating our friends alive. And they deserved it. Jack gave his life for the colony, and Ralph had been a steadfast leader and builder. Both would be missed. The local wild boys were raiding our food stores, so we went to work dispatching them like the vermin they were. There are no free meals on this island. With 4 mouths to feed and less friction, progress finally started to be made. We had all the bodies buried and started tending to our fields. We vowed to never eat another friend again. An art bench was made, followed by a cooking area. Simple steps for humanity, but massive leaps for these young boys. Our skills were starting to be refined from the hardship of struggle. Ergo had developed a double passion for melee from beating down all the other kids. Practice makes perfect. We ended spring with Ø.H.M reaching the age of 13 and becoming a full-fledged adult. This was massive. Not only did this speed up his skill growth and reduce the amount of playtime, but it also unlocked smithing and research. It would finally be possible to technologically advance. And just like that, summer was upon us. We made it through so many horrible circumstances. We had aged, grown, and matured like a flower ready to spread its leaves and provide honey to the world. Summer, the month of heat, malaria, and salvation. We planted a bunch of daylilies in our bedroom, which worked surprisingly well to raise mood. This paired with some local ambrosia kept the group happy and healthy. The mood debuff from eating our friends had started to fade, and everyone had begun to forget the tragedy that unfolded last Christmas. Throughout the summer, we had Ø.H.M focus on making art. There were piles upon piles of wood lying around from clearing the land, and art would help keep our mood stable. The summer ended with muscle parasites and Roger turning 13. Now a fully grown man, Roger's legs grew long and powerful. He could now walk quicker than the average man. The wonders of evolution. Fall was a period of rapid expansion. With 2 adults functional now, we powered through construction. We also kept producing art and planting more daylilies. The new strategy was to make the island so beautiful that sadness became a forgotten emotion. On the 4th of September, another boy matured into a man. Our colony was growing exponentially. We finally had the stability to shift our focus towards research. There were so many options, but only one choice that was absolutely essential. The month was marked with many advancements. We had decided on our leader, Ø.H.M the resolute, the violent artist, and the eldest of the pack. Our bedrooms were expanding, art was being made, and civilization was starting to take form. The cold winds picked up and blew throughout the land. Winter had arrived. At this point, there were dozens of statues made by Ø.H.M, and he was becoming an increasingly proficient artist. Using art and flowers, we managed to stave off mental anguish, for it was Gandhi that once said, "Flowers and art heal the heart." More progress was made on our living quarters, and we celebrated the first hops harvest with a drum party. Christmas was spent reflecting on the year past. A year of savagery, despair, survival, and growth. We were whole, yet empty. The next year presented one final task: to raise all 4 boys to adulthood. Days were spent happy and productive. Ø.H.M continued pumping out art and started to become a master at woodcraft. Roger had found some solace in the sociopathic qualities of plants. They lived to die, a harmonious cycle. More advancements were on the horizon as Hyena experimented with life. Although not adept or proficient at intellectual pursuits, curiosity alone led to development and innovation. And Chimpanzee, the youngest of our survivors and one of the youngest in the starting group. On the night of the 82nd day, Chimpanzee turned into a man. We spent the night relaxing, drinking beer, and speaking about the future. No more nights would be spent with growling stomachs. No more mental anguish. No more savagery. Yet we had lost so many precious things along the way. Family, friends, and our innocence. We were no longer a group of boys. We were now men.